So hello everyone, I'm Blee and welcome to another video. You join me in my Renault Sport Clio 182. Now the purpose of this video is I'm going to try and figure out if I can recommend these cars or not. There's one just there as well, that's cool. Now I've owned this car for over 2.5 years or around that amount of time and about 16,000 miles. So I think that I'm in a good position to sort of give you my opinion on what's good and what's not so good about these cars. So without further ado, let's get into it. So I think the performance is really strong. You've got a lovely naturally aspirated 2 litre 16 valve engine that sends power to the front wheels via a 5-speed manual gearbox. Now they produce around 182 horsepower. On paper this might not sound like an awful lot, but remember this car weighs a little bit over a tonne. So the reality of it is that you've got plenty of performance really. I imagine it's around mid-7s to 60 in a realistic sort of scenario. Sort of cheats a bit because 60 is at the top of second, but anyway. Now the driving experience, if you're somebody who enjoys driving, I think you're going to really enjoy it. The way the engine revs out, it revs out to over 7,000 RPM and you get a lovely kick after 5,000. The low weight also helps this car be very agile in the corners, which adds to the driving experience. Now I don't claim to be a racing driver, you know, I'm quite sensible really, but I think this car drives brilliantly on roads like this. Now the low weight is great, you know, you've got plenty of agility in the corners, however it does sort of get blown around a bit on the motorway and it does follow grooves in the road, but that's kind of something you get used to. So the third reason I can recommend these cars is for looks. Now this might sound odd because obviously everybody's going to have a different opinion on the outside, but I think these cars look really good. They are starting to fall into the sort of future classic category, I guess. Don't really like it calling it that, but they are. So they haven't overdone it on these, fairly subtle exterior stuff, but it does have some nice things over the normal Clios. Mostly that would be the centre exit exhausts. I really like how those look. I think they are, you know, I just think they look really cool. And the car does look nice and squat from the back. You've got sort of fat tyres on each corner. I think it's got a really nice look to it. So those are some of the good things. What isn't quite so good about this car that makes it a little bit more difficult to recommend? Well, comfort. I say this in a sort of, I'm not sure if this is a negative because I don't think this car is necessarily uncomfortable. I think it does crash over bumps slightly, which isn't necessarily a good thing, as it does send a bit of a shock through the cabin, it has to be said. But, you know, from the car I had previously was no different, so to me it doesn't really affect me. I just thought that for some people it would be a bit of a negative. Perhaps more of an issue is if you are planning on carrying adults. I'm just under 6 foot. With the driver's seat in my position, I can't really fit behind myself. Now as I said, it depends what you plan on using the car for. If you rarely carry other passengers, it's going to be no issue. Now, having said that, I did take me and 2 other adults to France and back in this summer, so it was about 2,000 miles altogether, and none of us needed spinal surgery by the end of it, so it does crash, but I don't think it's uncomfortable. So what else makes this car difficult to recommend? The comfort, like I say, depends what you're going to use it for. I don't think it's too much of an issue. Now the interior quality, that is something else that I think, depending on what you're coming from and what you're looking for in a car, you might struggle with. Now obviously a 13-year-old Renault Clio is never going to be a Mercedes-Benz, and I don't think it's that bad in here. You know, there's some nice Alcantara touches on the door, half the seat's leather, half's Alcantara I think, which doesn't, you know, which helps make it a slightly nicer place to sit. It probably helps it sort of, it probably aids it in not rattling quite so much as well. But having said that, you aren't really given many luxuries in here, to be honest. I've got cruise control, aircon and a stereo. And in this car, the aircon doesn't work, so I've got cruise control and a stereo. But again, coming from older cars, I don't mind this. One thing I would say is I'd definitely recommend an aftermarket stereo. It's kind of a must in a car like this because otherwise your phone's just, you can't use it, and in this day and age, if you want your music, you really want to be able to choose it through your phone, don't you? So I recommend an aftermarket stereo. So the interior and the comfort levels of the car aren't necessarily top of the class, but what do you expect of a 13-year-old Clio? The one thing that I do struggle to kind of get over is the maintenance involved in one of these. Now, before I say how much I've spent on this car in 2.5 years and 16,000 miles, I should point out that obviously what you spend is going to vary greatly depending on what you've bought, like as in how that example has been looked after. This particular car wasn't very well looked after, so I'm not going to sugarcoat it. In 2.5 years and 16,000 miles, this has cost me £4,000 in maintenance. Now, to me, I think that is kind of inexcusable and is kind of a reason not to recommend the car. However, if you do buy carefully, you obviously will have less issues. The previous owner of this car didn't look after it, so I suppose a large chunk of that money has gone on rectifying things that really should have been sorted out by the previous owner. Having said that, there are a few things that are worth looking out for if you do want one of these. There is a belt change that needs doing every 5 years and 72,000 miles, or 36,000 miles in 3 years, depending on where you look, and that costs around 600 quid. That was because it's quite labour intensive and needs specialist tools. You know, the engine is shoved into this engine bay quite tightly, so I can kind of see why it costs a lot to sort that out. But on the whole, I think if you buy carefully, maintenance, I shouldn't be too bad, I think. So to summarise, what do I think of the Renault Sport Clio 182 and can I recommend one? Well, the performance is great, the handling is great, you know, these cars are great fun to throw around, and as I said, I'm no racing driver, but I think this car can do much more than I'm capable of. I think as long as you're aware of what you're getting into, you're not going to be disappointed. Like I say, the interior and the comfort aren't necessarily there, but as long as you don't come into this expecting a Rolls Royce or a Mercedes Benz, I don't think you're going to be disappointed and you'll be willing to overlook some of the shortcomings. You know, the maintenance thing is a big issue, but I think as long as you buy carefully, which apparently I didn't do, you won't have the issues that I've had. Just be aware of the sort of potential service costs. So on the whole, I think yes, I can recommend these cars, they're great fun. Now I'll round it up, so thank you for watching. I'm Blee. If you could check out my social media links, that'd be great, and perhaps subscribe. Cheers.